All right, good evening. My name is Don Ficken. I'm with the Library Telescope Program, and I'm joined by Marc Stowbridge and Tom Lynch. All of us have been part of the Library Telescope team for quite a while, and we're excited tonight to bring you another monthly webinar on the Library Telescope. This one's about the durability of the Library Telescope, featuring Marc Stowbridge from the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. If you're not familiar with the Library Telescope, it's been around a few years. Marc will talk about that a little bit tonight. We've actually got a world map. You can go to our librarytelescope.org and click the locations button, and you can zoom in on the US or Canada or portions of Europe, and all the way down to in the states. In the case of the US, you can actually go down to the state, or in Canada down to the province, and get listings of locations that we know for sure, or at least that we think have the Library Telescope. And we've recorded over 700 locations. Many of those have mini telescopes, so it's getting to be quite a popular program, and many of them also have binoculars. So just go to librarytelescope.org and do some searching. So there's a few program opportunities before we get to our regular program tonight. One is September 9th through 16th of this year. We're promoting the International Library Telescope Observing Week. A library telescope is really great to look at things like craters on the moon and the moons of Jupiter and the rings of Saturn. And we've picked this week, the first 2 hours after sunset, to kind of focus on that. So if you can get a library, this is a good chance to bring up something to encourage your patrons to look at these things in the sky with the Library Telescope. And obviously, if you're a patron, get out there and enjoy this. It's really a lot of fun to look at all those things. I will say that the rings of Saturn are just amazing through, even though they'll be small, it's very, 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 very cool to look at it through this telescope. Another opportunity at the 1st of October, which we're going to hear about next month, actually, as for our webinar, is about International Observe the Moon Night. The moon is one of the best objects to look through a telescope, or through a library telescope at, and it's really just amazing, the detail. You can zoom in on the craters. It's just stunning, actually. It's so bright that we actually have to put a little cover on it and make a smaller hole so that it's not as much light coming through. And so we'll be talking about that next month in our webinar. And but put that on your date. October 1st is International Observe the Moon Night. So this is a list of our this year's programs, actually. In fact, it doesn't even have January on there. The list is getting too long. Tonight, obviously, August, actually it's 24th now, because we actually delayed it 1 week, is the durability of the Library Telescope. Last month, we had 3D printing of the Library Telescope. If you're having trouble getting parts, sometimes you can actually 3D print the parts. We've got a whole bunch of what we call hacks out there on librarytelescope.org website that explain that. And then, of course, next month, September 21st, we've got this little bit of information about the NASA's Lunar Observing Event. And so we'll actually have a scientist talk with us a little bit about that. Now, all of this is on librarytelescope.org, the events. And I will say that Tom Lynch does a terrific job on Facebook with the Library Telescope page. So check both of those out. If you go to librarytelescope.org, at the very top right, you can click on the YouTube button. We have lots of these. Most of these videos are out there, and you can really enjoy those at your leisure. We obviously recording tonight, and we'll post those out in the next couple of days, as well as you can find it on Facebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this out, because I have to bring up Mr. Stowbridge's presentation. Just 1 second. Let me do that. I can figure this all out. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Marc Stowbridge. Now, a lot of you are very familiar with Marc Stowbridge. He's part of the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, and he's, in the old words, he's the guy that helped thunk up this thing. He's the guy that put this idea together. He's going to talk to you a little bit about what he's did over a few years to get to where we are today. But most importantly, he's going to talk about how durable this product has been, because I know if you're a library, you really hate to spend money and have this basically not work in maybe 6 months or a year or whatever else, especially when you're spending this kind of money. And they're not that expensive, relatively speaking. So he's going to talk about this tonight. We're going to be taking questions at the end of the program. We'll be taking them on Facebook Live. So just put it in the comments area. If you're listening to Facebook Live, we'll try to catch your questions. And if you're on Zoom, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A area. Again, we'll try to get all the questions at the end here. But let's just get started with Marc. So Marc, it's really great to see you. It's quite a little program you have here. You want to talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing over the last couple of years and how durable this telescope is?
Okay. Why don't you do the next slide? I am Marc Stowbridge. I'm with the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. I'm also a solar system ambassador with it's a volunteer educator role with NASA JPL. And as I said, I've been blamed for starting the program here in New Hampshire 13 years ago. We got a rather unexpected gift from a library that when we were doing the Skywatch, they gave us $200 as a donation, which is and still is rather unheard of. And being an educational nonprofit, much talk was spent trying to figure out what to do with it. And I said, well, in as much as they seem to really like astronomy and telescopes, let's buy them one. And that took a while to figure out because you didn't want to have something that would just be frustrating. Like one of my pet peeves is German equatorial mounts for beginners. Those are the ones that have the counterweights at the end of a shaft, and they're just annoying unless you're into photography, which beginners generally aren't. So anyway, we've sorted out a telescope that was rugged to begin with, had a very wide field of view, which means that when you're looking at something through like a usual refractor, you're seeing about that much of the sky, and things will just go past you, and you're always pushing it around. This thing has a view like that, which is nice because some child can be looking at, say, the moon and say, Mom, come here, take a look at this. And she can, put down her tea, get up, amble over, take a look, and it's still in the eyepiece. Now, it worked out pretty well here in New Hampshire. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but word got out about this, actually quite on purpose. We started posting things on the web, and there were articles in Sky and Telescope, Astronomy Now in London, the Astronomical League, and the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. And lots and lots of people heard about it, and it took off surprisingly fast. At about the same time that we started doing this, libraries started getting into the library of things, where you could go to the library and get pots and pans and tools and things to measure your electrical usage and all kinds of widgets. And so this fit in right nicely with that. A lot of astronomy clubs have complained about the graying of astronomers, something I can relate to. And what we found is that, we started off with about 100 and something members of the club. We're over 200 now, and an awful lot of those from the past 10 years or so are people who were introduced to us through the Library Telescope program. Now, I understand that a lot of people who don't have much experience with telescopes could be intimidated by the idea of having something like this, particularly if you're a librarian and in circulation, or if you're a patron saying, oh my goodness, I don't want to take responsibility for bringing this thing home. What if I break it? And those of us who have been in the program for a long time have some experience with reassuring librarians, clubs, and patrons that the program is a win-win for everybody. Next slide, if you would. I actually took some marketing classes a long time ago, and I'm not sure that really sunk in, but I do have a fond spot in my heart for librarians who have helped me through all manner of education. And I know that if you want to talk to a librarian, starting off with a Frost poem is not such a bad thing. This is from the Star Splitter, one of Frost's poems less traveled by. And it talks about Brad McLaughlin, who's as he puts it, a hugger-mugger farmer, which is to say not so good, that does things by lamplight he should have done by daylight, and does things after the ground froze that he should have done before it froze. A personality type I can relate to. But he says, as it says here, the best thing we're put here for is to see, and the strongest thing that's given us to see with's a telescope. Someone in every town, seems to me, owes it to the town to keep one. In Littleton, it may as well be me. Now, it did take me a couple of years to get a telescope into Littleton's library here in New Hampshire, and I was very pleased when that happened. Next slide. This is a picture that I took yesterday of the very first telescope that was placed anywhere. It has recent modifications. They didn't start out like this, but this is how they have evolved. And as it says here, it's been used by schools, clubs, heaven knows individuals, vacationers, because we're in New Hampshire in the Lakes region and just south of the White Mountains. So we get lots of tourists up here, which is delightful. And we've used it for sky watches at schools and camps and at the library, of course. I do try to check in on it every once in a while, but I have trouble with this one and other telescopes throughout the state of just finding it in. I usually have to call ahead and reserve it. The scope is typical in that it is in perfect condition. It's 13 years old. People generally respect quality things and treat them accordingly. I think if you gave them, a little tiny telescope with wobbly tripods and it lent itself to frustration, they wouldn't pay that much attention to it. But this comes across like it's a real telescope, and even youngsters are generally very kind to it. Next slide. As I said, that telescope didn't come out of the box that way. Sort of starting from the top of the telescope, we put we drilled a hole in the dust cap and put a little plug in there so that when people insist at looking at the moon when it's full, and that's the worst time because everything's glary and it's hard to see detail on the surface. When the sun is coming in obliquely, you get to see shadows, and you can figure out that the dark and the light areas are actually mountains and plains. So we've got as it's called here, a moon port. The red dot finder, I have one. See if I can hold it where you can see it. This is as it comes originally, and it has a little nickel-sized battery in it there. This is actually one of the newer models, but they're all pretty much the same. And you look through it when it's turned on, and there will be a little red dot in the middle. And if you put that on whatever it is you want to look at, it'll be in the eyepiece. These little batteries are annoying, and in the old version, you had to go underneath to stick it in. So as you can see on this one, on the red dot finder, there's a AA battery pack stuck on the side. And that's just much easier. And if you forget to turn it off, the AA batteries there will last, I think I figured it out to be a couple of weeks versus a day. The lens caps, which are invariably flat black plastic, so when you drop them on the ground in the middle of the night, you have no chance at all of finding them. Pretty much everything that you can drop has a string attached to it. The you can see around the back that there's a little like camera bag or belt pack, and in that are the instructions, the Audubon Society Pocket Guide to the Constellations, and usually a headlamp or a red flashlight, and anything else that we can stick it in there that'll make it easier to use. There's something else I was thinking of. Oh yes, the zoom eyepiece. These telescopes come with two adequate eyepieces. And they're fine if you're just a family or an individual and you want to swap from, you try looking through the high power and notice that everything is mushy. And so you switch to the low power, which is where most everything works best, and things are brighter and bigger. But it's something else to drop and lose. And so we attach a zoom eyepiece there that just means you have to give it a little twist and you go from very low power to a respectable high power. And last but not least, see if I can, where it'll be show up. These little donuts are made out of rubber flooring mats, and these fit in the cup of the eyepiece. And it's nice because otherwise people will sort of orbit around trying to get their eye in the right place. This centers their eye, and it keeps fingers from going in there with the, is there glass in there question. So, and during COVID times, instead of trying to figure out how to wipe, an alcohol or disinfectant wipe on an eyepiece, you just wipe over the top of that, because this is what anybody who's going to touch anything is going to touch. So, and last but not least, at the back of the telescope, which is where the tube is down at the bottom, there are adjustment screws. There's 6 of them when it comes out of the box, and they adjust the tilt and position of the main mirror. They just cry out for fiddling. So one of the first telescopes that we placed, this one, I came to the library once and found that the main mirror was kind of flopping around inside because somebody had tried unscrewing them. So now we've taken those off completely. And one of the ways we've dealt with it is we put locking nuts on there. So unless you have an 8mm wrench, you can't change it. And that's one reason why the collimation on these, or the adjustments on these things, are just so solid. Whew. Next slide. So in the beginning, in late 2009, I placed the first telescope in my hometown here in Tamworth, New Hampshire. It was lightly modified and had a first draft of the instructions. And let me, if you can see that, that's the instruction manual that comes with it. And it's, pages thick. This is what we wrote. It's spiral bound, it's laminated, because you're going to have this out at night, and anything that's out at night in your telescope and you are going to get covered with dew. So this is dew proof, and everything you need to know is here. The the original instructions will give you the math to figure out the magnification. We put a sticker on the side of the telescope that tells you what the magnification is. When it's at 8mm, it's such and such, and when it's at 24, it's something else. And it just, you don't have to worry about anything. As I usually do, when I'm dropping them off, I told the staff to take it home, and they reported their experiences to me. I started to make changes, and made modifications to the scope as things came up. They wanted to know, how do I find the North Star? So in the new instructions, it tells you how to find the North Star. Neighboring libraries soon had their own scopes, not to be outdone by Tamworth, and we got more and more feedback, and I think we've, as I say in the next line or so, we've gone through about 12 editions of the instruction manual, and it's pretty much standard now. Different clubs, different libraries may have similar but not identical instruction manuals. On our website, we have the Word document posted so that people can easily make changes. Well, here in New Hampshire, we've got well over 160 telescopes placed. We've got a few in 3 other states, and we've directly assisted a delightful number of clubs and libraries in over 6 countries now in developing their own library telescope program. Next slide. Now, as far as the, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this technical thing? Not much. The telescope, if you're looking down into the tube, and again, I took these pictures yesterday, you'll see the primary mirror, and in the middle, held together by these thin veins, is the secondary mirror that bounces the light into the eyepiece. I've never cleaned the mirrors on this telescope after 13 years. There's a little dust on them, but a little bit of dust won't matter. You could probably, Hars, put a glob of peanut butter on the mirror and it wouldn't make much difference. It'd be kind of like taking off that little moon aperture, and it would just make the view a bit dimmer, but it wouldn't hurt anything. But the mirrors are tucked away inside the tube, out of reach of all but the most enterprising people. And even if they did need cleaning, it's just not that hard to do. But this is not something a librarian would ever have to do. They just call up the local club or sponsoring astronomer and say, help. That little circle in the top picture is a paper reinforcer. And when we align the optics, we take a laser, replace the eyepiece with the laser, shoot the laser in and bounce light around. And when it's correct, the laser light, like in the second picture down below, the laser beam will hit right in the middle of that donut and then bounce back up to the eyepiece and go in the hole it came out of. And that way we know that it's perfect. A lot of telescopes will need collimation almost every time they're used. The last time I adjusted these mirrors was about, I think, 8 years ago, and that was because I was changing something about how we secure the mirror. These telescopes are pretty rugged. They have some, there are some parts that if you are not careful, you can break, but there are also parts that are very easy to fix, repair, and even proactively replace or modify so that that doesn't happen. It's not something to worry about. Next slide. As I said, you never have to fiddle with the optics. If when the telescope comes in, if the librarian can just take a look through it to make sure that all the parts are there, then that's pretty much all you need. And if bits of peanut butter come because somebody, some 5-year-old or somebody acting like a 5-year-old, goes sticking their finger into the eyepiece, a call to the local astronomy club will show you either how to clean it or they'll come and clean it, and it's rarely an issue, and it's quickly fixed. This brings up what I think is a main point. I was a bit befuddled, more than usual, when asked to put this presentation together about the durability of the library scopes, because they're pretty durable. There's not a whole lot to talk about that isn't covered in our video about hacks and repairs and things. But the real thing is the durability of the support system that you have with the program. If you go on YouTube and search for library telescope program or library telescopes, there are, I don't know how many, but many tens, if not hundreds of videos by clubs and libraries, all about how to carry them, how to put them in a car, and you just seatbelt them in. Different clubs will have different approaches to different modifications and publications. Libraries have developed their own policies and procedures. Some libraries will have you sign a waiver. Talking to librarians, I found that if they ask for a driver's license, that seems to make it official when people are taking things out. And whatever problems they have with the use of the computers in the library or books coming back or telescopes, that seems to fix that. So I think that whatever your question may be about the program, given how many people have asked questions along the line, you'll find an answer. And I've yet to find something that hasn't been approached and addressed. So when you start this program, you're not alone. Next slide, if you would. And here are some contact information. The New Hampshire Astronomical Society has a whole page that has 5 videos on everything from how to pick it up, how to adjust the red dot finder, how to use the focuser, and there are also on that page are the original modification instructions. So if somebody wants to change things around, at least they have a good place to start. And there's the Facebook page. YouTube has a whole bunch of stuff. And the website of librarytelescope.org is wonderful. That's a clearinghouse for information on just about everything about the program. And Don, if you want to take it over at this point, I think I'm talked out.
All right, well, Mark, thank you. That's very helpful. It's been a question that we often get is how long will this library telescope last? And so Mark has talked from his area, New Hampshire. We have a program here in St. Louis that has actually a few more telescopes than Mark's program has. We have over 170. And we've been at this a little less time, but we've been able to repair pretty much every telescope. Sometimes it takes us a little while to figure out how to solve the problem, but it eventually does. Now, Tom, you're in New York, right? And so what's your experience?
Well, I've seen a lot of minor problems with it, but the durability is there. I've been doing this for about 7 years now. And the problems sometimes appear to be a big deal, but as Mark said, once you've dealt with it, it's easy to do it again. So some of the things that I've seen are lots of problems with the viewfinder, with the battery, being out of alignment. Those are all adjustment things. They're not a big deal, so they're easy to fix. The one of the issue that I saw was a loose focusing tube. That tube can get loose if people I think people kind of pull on it perhaps, and that's why it is like that. But that's easy to fix too. I was a little nervous about opening that up and fixing it, as Mark's showing it to you there. And but once I did it, took me a couple of minutes to do it. I was amazed at how easy it was, and I've probably repaired 6 or 7 of those now. So there isn't much that can go wrong that can't be fixed pretty easily. I actually had one of the little legs on the bottom get broken off, which I tell you, I don't know how somebody did that, but they managed to do it. And it really wasn't that hard to fix. It took me a little while to think of it. I cut off the bottom of a chair and screwed that into it. Yep, a little bit of and but the knob was gone. So really what I had to do was replace it. So again, as Mark said, you know, there doesn't seem to be anything that can't be fixed. And of course, if you drop it and break the mirror, that's a problem. But you know, that can be replaced too, but probably most of the cost of the telescope. So as long as you handle it reasonably, it'll be just fine, and it'll last a very long time. When I first started, I thought to myself, well, 5 years is about right. You know, maybe it's got a 5-year life, but that's not so. I mean, Mark's got the one there going for 13 years. I've got a couple going for 7 years, and there's really no end in sight to it.
So I've got a question from, actually, this is from Zoom. And this person's in Massachusetts, and they're a middle school astronomy club. And they were purchasing telescopes from Cornerstones, and Cornerstones of Science is not actually doing the telescopes anymore. And they're asking, where can we get? They said, we've raised, we've had $500 donated to us, and we want to buy a second telescope. Does anyone know where I can purchase another one? And is $500 enough?
I was just talking with, oh gosh, my brain is seizing up. The folks that sell the Zoomals. And the Zoomal Z114 is pretty much identical to the Star Blast, which is on back order, probably till late fall, it sounds like. And you can find them. What's the going price? About $250, I think.
Yeah. So it's a very tricky kind of thing. We're beginning to come out of the COVID supply chain issues. I think next 6 months we'll see hopefully some improvement. So the Zummel right now is offered by High Point Scientific and Amazon, and Amazon is the one right now that has a little stock. In fact, surprisingly, we just purchased 10 last couple of days for St. Louis. So one of our libraries has 122 waiting list, and they wanted 10 more library telescopes. Now, you're not going to be able to buy the telescopes pre-made. In other words, you'll get the standard stock, and then you have to make a few changes to it. Now, it's really up to you whether you make all the changes or some of the changes. The library telescope, if you put a zoom lens on it, the zoom lens will remove the issue of the losing eyepieces and so forth. You don't necessarily have to put a moon port, but you can put the ropes and a few stickers on that. So you can do a pretty basic job, and it'll work. In fact, Tom, I believe that Tom didn't even change the mirror screws. He simply put a sign there, don't touch these mirrors. So you'll have to do a little bit of maintenance on it. I believe yesterday, the Zummel was about $239, and in St. Louis, when I put all the little pieces together, and I buy some different brands of, not necessarily the Celestron eyepiece, you can get Astromania eyepiece and get the same thing. It's about $150 add-on. So if you take the roughly $240 plus $150, you're not talking $500. So $500 should be enough to get this, at least right now. But you have to really watch the Amazon, and we're not recommending any particular thing, but Amazon, if you get that right now, they have some, but they could be out of stock tomorrow. That's the way it is. So in fact, Orion will have them suddenly pop up, and then all of a sudden everybody buys them out and they're gone. So you have to watch what you're doing, but you should be able to get some telescopes. And I think $500 for now probably will do the trick. I'm hoping they'll get more effectively priced, but we'll see. I think part of the issue is the shipping is very expensive right now. So it's been one of the issues in just supply chain. All right, so do we have any other questions here? I don't want to take our program too long. We're a little bit over time here, but I want to make sure that we do have a chance to answer any questions. One of the things I do want to add on the library telescope durability is we do have on our librarytelescope.org page some 3D printing, what we call hacks. It's HACKS, where you can print stuff, little parts. Sometimes the parts are hard to get. One example is if you take the cover to the eyepiece, that little black thing with a rope on it, those things, we've lost dozens and dozens of those. You can actually print a replacement cover for pennies if you have someone that knows a little bit about 3D printing, and it works just fine. And so there's the same thing. You could even print the entire cover over the telescope, the one that has the hole in it with the moon port. And so there's a lot of little options right there. If you're a little clever, you can come up with ways to replace the parts that's missing. All right, guys. Are there any other questions out here that I'm seeing on Zoom? I don't see anything else on Zoom. Do I see anything else do we have any other questions from the audience out here on Facebook or Zoom?
Not that I can see, no.
All right. All right, so this video will be posted out. It'll be on Facebook Live, almost immediately. Oh yeah, here's another question. It says, it took us the entire school year to clean a 10-inch mirror and reinstall. There's no time to modify one. Is there any place that offers them pre-modified? I don't think anybody that I know of, at least right now, you can buy them as they are, and it will work. You can actually check them out, but there's no one that I know of right now that's actually pre-modifying these. Now, I think, Caitlin, if you have an astronomy club in your area, they might be able to take care of that for you. I'm not real sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you can find a local astronomer, that's a big help. Somebody who's got some experience with it. And if you can't, well, first of all, there's probably an astronomy club not that far from you. And even if it seems far, you might have a member of that club who lives around the block from you. Because if there's not a lot of clubs in your area, then a lot of these astronomers are getting together with clubs that are covering a really big distance. So definitely try and find an astronomy club, which there's a list of them at the librarytelescope.org, and that'll give you a way to get in touch with an astronomy club, and maybe they can help. And if you can't find an astronomer, you may be like a school science teacher, or really just anybody that's handy. I'm not particularly handy, and I'm familiar with telescopes, but the first one that I modified, I was terrified. I was cutting holes in the tube and doing all kinds of things that I thought I was going to break it. And, after a little bit, it really isn't that hard. So anybody who's a little bit handy can do this.
On the New Hampshire Astronomical Society, the nhastro.com, we're an org, but it's a com. And there's step-by-step instructions. And I've taught, 30 or 40 people how to modify telescopes. And you find your comfort level. Some people, would think nothing of taking the finder scope apart and soldering in new connections. Other people do it a different way that fits their skills. So of taking the finder scope apart and soldering in new connections. Other people do it a different way that fits their skills. So of taking the finder scope apart and soldering in new connections. Other people do it a different way that
we got a little feedback here. So I'm not sure exactly where that's coming from. All right, so I'm not sure it's exactly here. So I'm not sure where it's coming from. So one of you guys got a little Facebook playing there?
Yeah, I don't think it's me.
Hang on a second. All right, sorry guys, that was me. I had a second screen open. So I had a question about batteries. What's the batteries for? What are the batteries for on the red dot finder?
The batteries have they come with these small nickel-sized batteries that are very nice, very small, but they also don't last terribly long. So the red dot finder has a tiny little LED in it, And we have been putting on the side of the red dot finder a AA battery case. And that just is just so much easier. If you forget to put turn the finder scope off, which is easy to do, the AA batteries will last, I think I figured it out, for a couple weeks, whereas the little ones, a couple days maybe. So that's all there is for that. And there are a number of different hacks on the librarytelescope.org site where you can replace it with various sorts of just simple tubes that you look through, and that works fine. So you can get rid of the batteries altogether if you'd like.
So Caitlin, we're gonna wrap up here, but I want to give you one more idea here. You know, sometimes we get so caught up in making all these changes that we sort of miss the thing that we just need to get the telescope out there. So I wouldn't necessarily feel too bad if you just bought the telescope and bought a zoom lens, stuck it in there, and started checking it out. Now you'll have to kind of watch it. The batteries will run down, but some people don't put the battery packs on there. They just replace the little, it's a 2032 battery number, and you can buy them by the bucketfuls and just replace it every so often. Just watch it. The stickers, you know, it's probably not that hard to put stickers on there, but what the heck are the ropes? But if you don't want to do that, if your staff pays attention to it, I think they can watch that pretty closely. Some people choose not to go very far on changes. So if you'll learn, I think Tom Lynch on our call here originally did not make the changes to the mirror for a long time. And after a while, he found out he had to collimate every once in a while. So you can start out pretty simple and maybe make changes later if you have to. So I wouldn't necessarily let that hold you up.
Yeah, I'm kind of a minimalist on this, and I did not put the extra battery on there. I left it with the lithium battery, which has been a pain in the neck, I got to admit. I did not, at first I covered the screws in the back, and then I was worried about drilling into the tube, so I didn't, and I put a little message there, please do not touch, and that worked really well for about 5 years. And then all of a sudden, I've had a couple of problems with it lately. So I'm looking to move over to the non-standard screws to make it a little bit easier, a little bit harder to mess with. So I haven't done that yet, but I'm about to get going on that.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. You can look sometime tomorrow. I hope I'll be able to get this out onto a YouTube video. It'll be on Facebook Live tonight. But we appreciate, Mark, your presentation tonight, and Tom for your help. And our next month program will be basically on International Observe the Moon Night. Once again, the library telescope is terrific to look at the moon. Your patrons will absolutely be stunned by the craters that you can see in that library telescope. I think October 1st, which is the night of the International Observe the Moon Night, will be a first quarter moon, which means they can get the really good shadows and see those really nice craters. And by the way, I think Saturn will be up about that time too. So there'll be a couple really nice targets. So anyway, we'll have that. And that is a scientist will actually talk to us about this chance for your library or your club to get involved in Library Telescope International Observe the Moon Night. So anyway, thanks to everyone for joining us tonight, and join us next month. Thank you.